Consider this sentence. This sentence is false. If it's true, then what it says must be the case. But what it says is that it's false. So it must be false. If it's false, then its claim is wrong. But its claim is that it's false. So it must be true. Either way, we reach a contradiction. This is the liar's paradox. And it has tortured logicians, mathematicians, and philosophers for over 2,000 years. A single sentence, barely 10 words long, that tears a hole in the fabric of logic itself. Why does it matter? Because it isn't just a curiosity. The liar's paradox sits at the heart of some of the most profound discoveries in mathematics and logic in the 20th century. Understanding it means understanding something deep about the nature of truth, language, and the limits of formal systems. The paradox has ancient roots. Around 600 BCE, the Cretan philosopher Epimenides reportedly declared, "All Cretans are liars," since Epimenides himself was a Cretan. This creates a puzzle, though not a full paradox, since it could simply be false without contradiction. The clean version came later. The philosopher Eubulides of Miletus, in the 4th century BCE, formulated what he called the pseudomenon, the liar, by asking, "A man says that he is lying. Is what he says true or false?" This version is explicitly self-referential. The statement refers to itself. And that self-reference is the source of all the trouble. For centuries, the paradox was treated as a clever puzzle, a logical trick, something a sharp mind could dismiss. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as mathematicians tried to build rigorous foundations for all of mathematics, the liar's paradox stopped being a curiosity. It became a crisis. In 1901, Bertrand Russell discovered a closely related paradox in set theory. Consider the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Does this set contain itself? If it does contain itself, then it fails the membership condition. It should not be a member. If it does not contain itself, then it satisfies the condition and should be a member. Russell's paradox threatened Frege's entire program of grounding mathematics in logic. Frege had spent years building a formal system, and Russell's letter announcing the paradox arrived just as Frege's second volume was at the printers. Frege wrote back, "Arithmetic totters. Both the liar and Russell's paradox share the same deep structure. Self-reference combined with negation. A statement that says something about itself and denies it. A set that defines itself by exclusion from itself. This structural similarity is not a coincidence. It points to something fundamental about what language and formal systems can and cannot do." The most influential early response came from Alfred Tarski in the 1930s. Tarski's insight was elegant. The paradox arises because we try to use language to talk about the truth of statements in that same language. Object language and metalanguage get confused. Tarski proposed a hierarchy. At the ground level, we have the object language, the language we use to make statements about the world. At the next level, the metalanguage, the language we use to talk about the truth or falsity of statements in the object language. Crucially, a statement in the object language cannot meaningfully make claims about its own truth. When we say, "This sentence is false," we are mixing levels, using a sentence to comment on its own truth value, which Tarski declared semantically inadmissible. Under Tarski's schema, the liar's paradox is not a genuine statement at all. It is malformed, like trying to specify an object by referring to it before it exists. The paradox is dissolved by denying that it constitutes a well-formed claim about truth. This solution is technically rigorous, but many philosophers find it unsatisfying. Natural language doesn't come with pre-labeled levels. People make self-referential claims all the time. Is Tarski's hierarchy a solution, or a way of fencing off the problem? A more radical approach came from Saul Kripke in his landmark 1975 paper, Outline of a Theory of Truth. Kripke proposed that some sentences simply lack a truth value. They are neither true nor false. Instead of forcing every meaningful sentence into true or false, we allow a third category, undefined, or grounded versus ungrounded. A statement is grounded if its truth value can eventually be determined by working from facts about the world. Snow is white is grounded. We go check the snow. The liar's paradox is ungrounded. Its truth value depends entirely on itself, going around in circles with no anchor in reality. It isn't false, and it isn't true. It simply fails to land. Kripke's framework uses a construction from mathematical logic called a fixed point. Starting from facts about the world, we build up the extension of the truth predicate through repeated iterations. Sentences that get a stable value in this construction are grounded. The liar never stabilizes. It oscillates, and so it gets no value. This approach is technically sophisticated and philosophically appealing. But it has a nemesis, the strengthened liar. Even if we accept that the liar lacks a truth value, we can immediately form a new version. This sentence is not true. This is sometimes called the strengthened liar or the revenge problem. If this sentence is not true, is true, then it's not true. Contradiction. If it's false, then it is not the case that it's not true, meaning it must be true. Contradiction. If it lacks a truth value, then it is not true, which is exactly what it says. So it seems to be true after all. Every proposal that handles the liar by adding new categories, undefined, gappy, indeterminate, immediately generates a strengthened liar that exploits those very categories. The paradox mutates to defeat every proposed solution. This is the revenge problem, and it haunts the field. Almost every solution to the liar generates a stronger version it cannot handle. It suggests that no simple restriction on truth predicates will suffice. Perhaps the problem is not with how we define truth, but with our most basic logical assumptions. The most provocative response is dialetheism, the view that some contradictions are actually true, defended most vigorously by philosopher Graham Priest. Dialetheism holds that the liar's paradox is both true and false simultaneously. This sounds absurd. Classical logic has a principle called ex contradictione quodlibet. From a contradiction, everything follows. If you accept any contradiction, you can derive any statement whatsoever. So accepting that the liar is both true and false seems to make logic useless. But dialetheists have a response. Paraconsistent logic. In paraconsistent logical systems, contradictions do not automatically license deriving everything. The explosive principle is blocked. You can have local contradictions without the whole system blowing up. Priest argues that the liar forces us to accept that reality itself contains genuine contradictions. True contradictions, called dialetheia. This is not a logical defect. It is a feature of a reality richer and stranger than classical logic assumed. Dialetheism is a minority view, but it is taken seriously. It forces us to ask, is classical logic a discovery about the structure of reality, or a convention we adopted because it usually works? The deepest connection of the liar's paradox is to Gdel's incompleteness theorems in 1931. Kurt Gödel proved that any consistent formal system powerful enough to express basic arithmetic must contain true statements that cannot be proved within that system. The proof is essentially a formalization of the liar's paradox inside arithmetic. Gdel constructed a sentence that says, in mathematical language, this statement is not provable in this system. If the system is consistent, the statement must be true. But then it cannot be provable. The system is incomplete. This is the liar's structure translated into mathematics. Self-reference plus negation. made precise with numbers. Gdel encoded statements about provability as statements about numbers, and then used that encoding to build a statement that comments on its own provability. The result was shattering. The dream of Hilbert, that all mathematical truth could be captured in a complete, consistent formal system, was proved impossible. The liar, in its mathematical incarnation, proved that no finite system of rules can capture all mathematical truth. The lesson is profound. Self-reference is not a bug in language. It is a fundamental feature of any sufficiently expressive system, and that feature generates irreducible incompleteness. What does all this mean for the nature of truth? The liar's paradox reveals that truth is not a simple property that sentences either have or lack. It is tangled up with language's capacity to talk about itself, with the way formal systems represent their own workings, and with the limits of any set of rules trying to capture something infinite and unbounded. Several lessons stand out. First, language is reflexive. Natural language can talk about itself, and this creates unavoidable complications that no simple definition of truth can handle cleanly. Second, formal systems have limits. Gdel showed that any formal system expressive enough to do arithmetic will either be incomplete or inconsistent. There is no escape from this. Third, the choice between solutions is a genuine philosophical choice. Tarski says restrict the language. Kripke says allow truth gaps. Priest says allow true contradictions. Each choice reflects deep commitments about logic, language, and reality. Fourth, the revenge problem suggests that the paradox is essentially ineliminable. Every solution breeds a stronger version. The paradox is not a disease to be cured but a pressure point where our ordinary assumptions break down. The liar's paradox is one of the most ancient and most stubborn problems in philosophy. It has been dismissed as a mere trick, been seen as a crisis for mathematics, and been used to prove that the universe contains genuine contradictions. Its persistence is telling. A paradox this old and this resistant to solution is not waiting for someone clever enough to figure out the trick. It is pointing to something genuinely hard about the nature of self-reference, truth, and formal systems. Every time human civilization has tried to build a perfectly rigorous foundation for logic, for mathematics, for language, the liar has been there to complicate it. It showed up when the Greeks tried to systematize argument. It showed up when mathematicians tried to axiomatize sets. It showed up in Gdel's proof that no axiom system is complete. Perhaps the lesson is this. Truth is not an object with clean edges that can be fully captured by any finite set of rules. It exceeds every system that tries to define it from within. Or perhaps, as the Dialetheists suggest, the world is simply stranger than classical logic assumed. And some contradictions are not errors to be eliminated but features of a reality that refuses to be forced into neat boxes. Either way, 10 words. This sentence is false. Have done more to reshape our understanding of logic and truth than almost any other statement in the history of thought. The liar keeps its secret, and in doing so, it reveals something profound about the nature of language, knowledge, and the limits of the mind trying to understand itself.